Welcome to Adventure Co Gaming. My name is Ryan, and I'm here to talk to you today about Riptide, Lurker of the Deep. Now, a little background story for me personally is back when Tales of Aria was first announced to have the elemental talents for each of the heroes that would be coming in the set, me and my friends started making jokes. I can't remember who exactly started it, but we always said that there would be, or I think I said it would be, or I was crossing my fingers for a water brute. And it was an ongoing joke because water was never revealed as one of the elements that Arya had. But every time a new set would come out, and be like, "Oh, we're just one more set away from having that water brute come out. It'll come." Um, and when we finally got the revealer for the first revealer for the characters from Outsiders, I almost lost it when I saw Riptide because I thought my prayers had been answered. But unfortunately, he's a ranger, but that doesn't stop him from being a very interesting hero and one that I'm definitely excited to play. So in this video, we're going to go into a general guide or a general review of Riptide as a hero, and my first deck list that I'm going to be testing out with him in the coming weeks once the set officially releases. Every hero in Flesh and Blood can be kind of defined mostly by their hero ability and some of the cards that are designed around that to define them compared to other heroes of the same class. Riptide's ability can be summarized to every card that you play from hand has reload, and every trap that triggers does an extra point of damage. Now, this is significant because Rangers have typically, or at least historically, had the problem with their consistency in that arrows that they want to play for similar damage values to other cards that can be simply played from hand have to be loaded into their arsenal first. The fact that Riptide has built-in reload basically on every card that he plays from hand means that that consistency issue is basically gone. It still doesn't help in maybe a single card hand where you're just holding an arrow with no resources to actually load it. But if you were to play like defense reactions during your opponent's turn, that would allow you to load the arrow ahead of time and be able to fire it during your turn, for example. This consistency also really helps with a new card that came out in the set, Death Touch. I find Death Touch to be an extremely powerful card, giving you the option to choose different forms of disruption or allow you to hit over value for a single energy cost. And with the only restriction being that it needs to be played from Arsenal like an arrow, which again Riptide can easily get around just by using other cards from hand to load it in. Now, doing damage on defense is nothing to scoff at either. It's nothing too crazy, and the traps do need to trigger with their actual intended effects in order to deal that damage. But anyone who's sat across from a brute with only 2 health remaining can definitely tell you that it's a very scary proposition to just keep attacking into a hero knowing that they can kill you when you do. So definitely something funny about his late game potential, or just being able to chip away your opponent's health throughout the game even when they're on the offensive. So definitely a fun ability. But that summarizes kind of what separates him from the other Rangers in particular. Before going into the deck list itself, I want to review some cards that I think are always, or should always be included in your Riptide list, no matter what kind of build you're going for, unless you're really squeezing in a very specific 60 cards otherwise, just because I find these cards in any situation with Riptide just generate so much value that it would be kind of like, it kind of feels like a mistake, or it kind of feels like you'd really need, like I said, need to have a very specific and very good reason to have a 60 card list without these ones. Starting with his specializations, the 3 blue, 3 defense, 0 cost traps that are Riptide specializations and Riptide legendaries. So each of them is limited to only 1 in the deck, but all of their effects are extremely powerful if the conditions are right to trigger them. Each of these cards has 3 defense on a blue defense reaction, and I think that is incredibly overstated in and of itself. Even without the effects, like having a blue defense reaction that defends for 3 and costs 0 is already very good stat-wise. So for both of these reasons, I can't find any reason that you wouldn't want to include them in any of your lists with Riptide. The second card that I want to go over is Codex of Frailty. This card is insanely powerful for all rangers, and I haven't really thought about its utility in Assassin, but I find the ability to search any card or attack action specifically from your discard, basically making it so that any card you've defended with or played already can just be grabbed using this card, to be an extremely powerful ability. Uh, the fact that you can grab something like a Command and Conquer and also force your opponent to have something loaded in their arsenal, assuming they have an attack action in their graveyard, to immediately try and destroy with Command and Conquer, while giving them a debuff and giving yourself a buff with the Ponder token, to be insanely overstated on a single card. Like, there's no question, especially if you leave it with the last card in your hand and just grab even just a zero cost attack action from your graveyard. Like, the fact that you give them a frailty token and give yourself a ponder token to make sure you can load something at the end of your turn into your arsenal is just insane on a single card. The next card I wanted to go over was Death Touch. Death Touch is something we talked about a little earlier, but I'll repeat that this card is insanely overstated, being able to hit for 6 for a single resource, and then also have the ability to give your opponent a debuff, or give your opponents a little more damage waiting for them at the end of their turn. And the fact that the only restriction on this card is that it can't be played from hand is, again, completely negated from Riptide's ability. All you need to play is a card with Go Again from hand, whether that's another attack or one of the buffs that you play in his list, and or even a defense reaction during your opponent's turn. And Death Touch can easily be loaded and played without having to worry about that restriction. The last card that I want to include in Riptide, and what I would say is probably important to include in any list, is Premeditate. Premeditate is kind of like Plunder Run back in the day, except it only buffs the next attack played from Arsenal instead of having to be loaded from Arsenal first. And instead of drawing a card during your turn, it gives you a Ponder token, so you draw one at the end of your turn to possibly Arsenal. Now, the fact, again, that this card can be used to load any card into Arsenal, or the fact that you're just a ranger and you play most of your arrows from Arsenal, loading them with the bow, means that you always get the attack buff part of it, and if you're going wide on your turn to hit with at least 2 attacks, your opponent has to completely block them out for you to not get value on the Ponder token. So, your typical 0 for +3 on your next attack, but with having all these other abilities and synergy with Riptide's ability, makes this card kind of a no-brainer to include in any list that you play with him. So, just to review, playing his traps, playing Codex of Frailty, playing Death Touch, and playing Premeditate, I think are 4 cards that I would include in any Riptide list I build. And to be honest, except for his specializations, obviously, 3 cards that I would include in most of any Ranger build. Now, finally getting onto the deck list, one thing that is kind of like a side benefit, or kind of like an added benefit to Riptide's ability to be able to load from playing cards from hand, is that if you sequence your turn right with something like Death Dealer, you can actually load multiple cards into your arsenal, with New Horizon as well, to go ahead and kind of go wide with Ranger, using cards that normally have the restriction of Arsenal kind of being taken care of with his ability, and just playing other cards from hand in tandem with cards like Bolt and Shot or other cards that have natural Go Again. So in my list, I decided to go with the 9 Bolt and Shot and 9 Captain's Call in order to make this happen as consistently as possible. Captain's Call is great because it can buff the damage on a card or give Go Again. Now that might seem redundant on Bolt and Shot, but we're not always going to assume that Bolt and Shot is the card that we're always going to have to load into our arsenal first as an arrow. So if you have something like, let's say one of the other arrows like Infecting Shot, and you have to load that first with Death Dealer to draw a card, you can give it Go Again with Captain's Call and then load another card into Arsenal like Death Touch right after, and fire both the arrow and then Death Touch from your arsenal. But if Bolt and Shot is the one that you have in your hand, you can give it the plus damage to make it a 6 for 0 arrow with the buff from Captain's Call that also has reload and has Go Again just from getting buffed. So definitely a powerful combination, and one that I think adds the most consistency to this deck. Death Dealer is definitely the bow we want to play, because starting off our turn loading it and being able to draw a card also makes it more consistent that we actually get a buff or a go again card that we can play from hand, and hopefully, of course, that being Captain's Call to give something go again or a Bolt and Shot bonus damage, and then being able to load a card right after that. Other than that, we definitely have Death Touch in red and blue. I didn't want to go with the full suite on these ones because even though Riptide makes it a lot less, I want to say, inconsistent in its restriction, Death Touch still has the fact that it has to be played or it can't be played from hand. So I don't want to get a hand clogged up with too many Death Touches or too many scenarios where I have no way to load it since it can't be loaded in with the bow like arrows can. Other than that, most of this stuff I feel is self-explanatory, just kind of either for value cards or go again cards like Ravenous Rabble and Snatch are just good ways to either have go again or threaten a draw for a good 0 for 4 on a 1-card hand. The traps and other stuff in the sideboard are mostly what I switch out for specific matchups. We got stuff like the Boulder Trap that's good against Guardians to start minusing their equipment anytime they swing with Titan's Fist. And then we've, of course, got Tar Pit Trap or Tar Trap for decks like Ninja with Go Again and on-hit abilities that you want to prevent. And then just things like Fate Foreseen to give you a little bit of extra defense against like Guardian and Warrior. Feign Death is good against Wizard to make sure you don't just get completely comboed by multiple cards from Kano, for example. And even possibly from Icelander on their turn, so you can at least block a little extra damage on a yellow pitch. And yeah, that kind of sums up this build, or the general idea behind this build. You essentially want to load an arrow with the Death Dealer, draw a card, play out a card from hand, whether that's attack with Go Again, or Captain's Call, or another buff to load another card afterwards, fire one of the cards with Go Again, and then play the second one right after it to, I think, fairly consistently, at least from some of the games I've seen on Talishar with this list, that a friend tested out for me against another friend, pretty consistently have comfortable hands or hands that you can work with in most situations. And even if you need to defend out or have a bad hand, I mean, taking a turn off is not the worst thing in the world, but you want to make sure that you're definitely making the most out of full hands or making the most out of your attacks in tandem with each other. So I feel this is a good way to go ahead and start trying to test that consistency. I haven't had too much time to test this a lot yet, but I will be testing it over the next couple weeks, especially after we get our hands on the physical set, and I'll make an updated video later, either talking about how successful it is or the changes that I would make after getting some games in and kind of seeing what the meta kind of fleshes out to be, whether that's filled with Guardians, filled with Dromize, filled with Assassins, or what have you. So I'll definitely update you guys in the coming weeks with any changes that I make to the list. And if you want to see the full list for yourself or copy it over so you can play it yourself, I'm going to leave the link in the description. So let me know what you think. If there's anything I left out or if there's any cool combos or cool interactions you think should be talked about with Riptide, let me know. And I'll definitely include it in my next video as well. Be sure to tune in tonight. We're going to be streaming the pre-release event at the Haven Games. Me and AJ will be commentating while we watch some of these players crack open some packs for the first time. And I hope you join us for all the hype that brings. Other than that, this has been Ryan with Adventure Co Gaming, signing off.